started. Let's do that. So, welcome to the third of 4 webinars in Softura's AI in Action series entitled Copilot for Employee Engagement and HR Self-Service. This webinar is designed to provide insight and direction to C-suite executives, HR professionals, and IT teams on the latest use of Microsoft Copilot to manage support of many mundane HR functions for your employees. I'm your host, Jim Edwards, an advanced technology account executive, and joining me are our presenters, Frank Brasky, Softura's Chief Evangelist for AI, IoT, and RPA, and Dr. Sri Sundaram, Founding Principal at the Holistics Group. Hey, Sri. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jim. How's it going?
Good. Doing well. We're excited for today. So, for those of you midway through an application development or modernization, you'll be taking in a lot of information today, and we encourage you to pause and consider the ideas presented. It could redefine your plans and help you to create something far better than your current trajectory. So, let's delve into how you can leverage Copilot for employee engagement and HR self-service. Let's begin. Frank and Sri, the audience is yours.
Thank you, Jim. So before we begin today's discussion, let's set the stage for it. Let's talk about the Genesis AI applications, right? People think, the whole aspect of AI just came about in the last 18 months. It's not so. It's been around for many years, right? Many decades even. So let's talk about that. So there's a relevance for organizations today, especially in the context of HR. So these problems in HR are not problems in opportunities in HR have been around for many years. But why do they take center stage today? Let's talk about that too. And then we'll have a couple of use cases, some descriptions and demos from the point of view of an HR persona, an employee, and we walk through her travails through her employment scenario. Then we'll talk about the business implications for all of this. Right? Why do we need to do this? Right? What's the bottom line for companies? So that will be a key part of it. Finally, we'll round it out to see what is next for us, what are the future trends that we see, and where we want to go in there. So to start out with the genesis of AI, like I mentioned earlier, everybody thinks, ChatGPT, Bard, and all of these things. We heard it for the last 10, 12 months. But really, it's been in the making for many years. You can look at it in 3 different areas. In the first section, there was this entirely academic pursuits, research pursuits that didn't have much public accessibility and use. Eliza, Harry, Alice, Joshua, those kind of things. Then there's a second group of AI, AI activity, if you will. Remember Deep Blue, IBM Watson, right? Remember the Deep Blue's chess match with Gary Kasparov, the then reigning champion of chess at that time. And then everybody knows Siri, right? Siri is one of those technologies that has really improved the public accessibility and use of these kinds of models. The last section then is about the genesis of ChatGPT, GPT in particular. GPT came about in 2015, but the current version, which is GPT-4, it was introduced earlier in March 2023, and there's been an astronomical, an exponential growth in the activities and in the embracement of these technologies. So that was kind of the overall picture of where we wanted to set the stage for it. Next, what we want to do really is let's set a baseline. When people talk about generative AI technologies, when people talk about large language models, what exactly are they referring to? Really, when you think about these large language models, there are 2 kinds of models. One is this auto-regressive model. ChatGPT is a good example there. Bard is a good example there. What do these auto-regressive models do? They take a set of words, we call them tokens inside of this lingo, and then based on this set of tokens, it predicts the next set of tokens. So when you ask a question for ChatGPT, it looks at this entire database of tokens that it has, and then based on the query that you're asking and its database, it generates the next set of tokens. Then there is what is called as the generative adversarial networks, called GANs. This is typically used in graphical upscaling like DALL-E, Microsoft Designer, and such, where two models that essentially compete with each other. Think about machine learning. There is this control model, and then there's experimental model. Similarly, here there is a generator and a discriminator. Both of these are competing to get you the best possible result. So essentially, large language models use these two kinds of models there: the autoregressive one and the GAN network. And the entire gamut of all of these are called as generative AI technologies. ChatGPT, DALL-E, they're all the generative AI technologies. Frank, I just wanted to open the floor for you to see if I've missed out something on this, if you want to care to add something here.
Sure. Yeah. No. Kind of two things pop out to me. Number one is GPT itself. Everybody uses the term, but they may not know what it actually means, and that's generative pre-trained transformer. And that's a mouthful that basically says, not only can I go and understand a lot of information, but I can actually make sense of it in context. So people say, "Oh, it's just predicting what the next word should be." It's more than that. It's what the next word should be in this given context. So that's GPT, generative pre-trained transformer. And the other one is the GANs. It's kind of an abstract idea, but a lot of the deep fakes that you're seeing, where people are, pretending to be a particular person, those are all being done with GANs.
Thank you for that, Frank. That was certainly I did comment there. Now let's delve into the relevance of all of these technologies in organizations, especially in the context of HR, right? In HR, task automation, making sure mundane tasks are relegated to some automated technologies was always a point there. Making sure improved decision-making by employees and leaders was always an issue. Workplace safety was always an issue. But why is it that now that these organizations are much more relevant? One of the reasons they're more relevant now is because of these technologies, the generative AI technologies. You can have a much more relevance to all of this, a much more completion of all of this. For instance, task automation. Taking care of all the mundane activities so that the employees can really focus on the activities that really matter, where the humans are really necessary, where human insight is valuable there. So that's a key area. The second part of it is, given the plethora of data and different kinds of data is available there, there's a sense for developing those complex data analysis and pattern identification that was hitherto not possible. So that's the second part. Then there is the personalized experiences, right? You want to make sure that they're tailored recommendations for each employee. In fact, today we're going to speak about Zoe, who's one of the personas here. We're going to talk about how Zoe gets some personalized experiences through the HR chatbot there. The next part, you might be wondering, why is new product and service development a key part of HR? Think about it this way: an engaged employee and a productive employee now has much more time to think about new products and service development. So the pace of innovation is accelerated much more than before. But today, we will focus really on workplace efficiencies. So the aspects that we want to talk about, the personas and the illustrations that we have today, is really focused on workplace efficiencies, especially in the context of HR. But before that, Frank, I know you have some information on how employees are really embracing AI. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. The picture you had up there with the robot reminds me. I've been doing automation for 30 plus years now, and I remember working with my first robots, and the people that I was working with them on, they were afraid the robots were going to take their job. And my point of view at that time was, if the robot can take your job, you don't really want it. And I know that that's kind of changed over time, but essentially, really what we're able to do now with these capabilities is to take the robot out of the human. So to let that, like you were saying, let the human creativity, the empathy, the compassion, the ingenuity and intuition, those things that make us uniquely human. Employees are starting to see that this is actually something they're interested in. And because if you look at, employee burnouts and the great resignation and the war for talent, folks feel like they're being asked to do more with less. Perspective, and Microsoft has done a great study called the Work Trends Index, and they've been doing that for a couple of years now, and the URL is there. And basically, it has a lot of very interesting information about how you can become, 3.5 times more strategically productive if you have these sorts of generative tools at your fingertips. And we'll go through and show you some of those examples today. So with that, I wanted to kind of ground everybody. Grounding is a artificial intelligence word that we use to talk about how we train and provide the baseline information for things like ChatGPT, Bard, and Bing. And if you haven't gone and seen them, just for the sake of time, I went ahead and took some screenshots. Here's an example of what ChatGPT looks like. You can go, and sometimes it gives you trouble if you're able to log in. I have a paid subscription. It's only $20 a month. I feel it's worth it just to be able to experiment and to be able to show people what all it can do. But on the left-hand side, you've got these different topics of prior conversations, and it will remember the context of those conversations. And Bard is Google's offering, and it's getting there. They've got a bunch of new information that they built their own Palma large language model, and it's fairly useful. You've got the ability to make it more concise or lengthy, but the one that has absolutely changed my everyday productivity and my work habits, especially with respect to what browser I use and where I go to find information. I have switched now to Bing, and if you haven't tried it yet, it's worth taking a look at. I've been a longtime Google fan and used it, probably hundreds of times a day, depending on what it is that I was working on. And now I completely have conversations. I actually have here in my setup at my home office, I've got 4 different screens, and my wife and I joke, I've got me, myself, and I up in ChatGPT, Bing, and Bard, and I'm often comparing them because there's a lot of uncertainty and this notion of providing incorrect information. And so, one of the things that Microsoft disclaims is that, AIs can make mistakes. You might have heard of them called hallucinations, but you have the ability to kind of choose from different styles. If you remember back with the ChatGPT, it had 2 different versions. This one can be more creative, so it's more likely to come up with incorrect information, or it can be more precise, where you basically say, if you don't know it, don't tell me.
Right.
And then last but not least is my favorite version of Bing Chat for the enterprise. And they call it the AI Copilot for the web, because over here, I'm actually logged in as my user ID from work. It shows me that I'm protected, and it shows me that my personal and company data are protected in this chat. It is not sending information out to the web, out to the cloud, to Microsoft or whomever about things that I'm asking about specific to my company. If I'm sharing financial data or whatnot, a lot of organizations have chosen to ban ChatGPT and others because basically they feel like they don't have much control over what happens to the information once it gets out there. But this way, I have control of it, and I know, I can trust that it's going to be taken care of appropriately. And so with that, we talked about Microsoft Copilot, and just wanted to tell you about that. So if you haven't heard of it, Microsoft 365 Copilot has been recently announced, and it's your AI assistant at work. And what it allows us to do is to take all of the AIs that we were just talking about, the large language models, take the apps that you know and use every day, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook, etc., information from the internet, and then this thing called your Microsoft Graph, which is all of your data and your relationships, what groups you're a part of, what your security profiles are, who you send information to, where you work, all of those sorts of things are part of the graph. And that information, when I talked about it being secure in that little green bar, what does that mean for me? Microsoft has been focused, heavily on the security, the compliance, and privacy to create responsible AI. And they have a comprehensive approach, and they publish that, and they're part of working groups for making sure that we're doing appropriate things with artificial intelligence. And so if we take some of those pieces of information, I probably didn't mention, but ChatGPT GPT 3.5 is from OpenAI, which is an artificial intelligence consortium. There are other models. You'll hear things like Palma, Llama, Dolly, Ada, etc. There's a lot of them out there, but essentially they more or less do the same thing. And you have the ability to actually create your own models on top of that. So you can combine those, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a bit. And this is an example of that graph. And so this is how Microsoft is able to, especially with Copilot, see when you're looking at files, what files should relate to this. I'll show you a quick video here in a minute where you see files pop up, and the way it knows what files and events and channels and chats and notifications and tasks should pop up, it's all based around you. And then
the good thing though, Frank, is the average user doesn't need to know all of this complexity, right? They just have to use it.
You just have to use it. Yes, I'm just trying to set this up so that when I show you what I'm showing you, I'm not showing you black magic or voodoo. It's actually real, and this is how it actually happens. So appreciate that. So I hope they make this cursor come to Windows, because I just love watching it. But these are the different ideas of things that you can do with your Copilot. So think of it as not replacing what you do, but working with you on an ongoing basis. So taking things that you've got in your email and summarizing them for you. Imagine being able to go into Outlook and say, what did I miss while I was gone? And it producing you a summary of all the information, the meetings that happened, who was working on what, being able to go and take information from that and turn it into an email, then take things that are happening dynamically in real time for trying to plan various things like an interview with new hires or potential candidates, putting together that information and tying it into your calendars. I'll show you a little bit of demonstration of that a little bit later. These are just some of the ideas and things that you can do with the Copilot. And so that's part of what I want to work with you today on is say, this is becoming generally available on November 1st. So if you're a Microsoft enterprise customer, you'll have access to this. And for individual users, it'll be $30 a month. I'm sure there'll be different licensing for large numbers. And with that, I hand it back over to Jim.
Very good. Now that we're going to be starting demos shortly, I wanted to let you know that the question and answer section, which is above over here somewhere on your screen, is open. And I'll be taking those questions and hand them off to Frank and Sri as we go through here. So please feel free to send questions through. So I'd like to introduce you to two key characters, Zoe and Allie. Zoe is a fictional but relatable employee at Softura. She's enthusiastic, career-driven, and navigating various life and career events. Allie is an AI-powered Copilot, specifically using Microsoft's Copilot, serving as a virtual AR assistant available 24/7. Allie handles all the forms to be filled out and tracks the progress on all onboarding tasks. Zoe can turn to Allie for quick, accurate information, whether she's onboarding, going through a major life event, or offboarding. And here's the kicker. Allie significantly lightens the load for our HR department, allowing them to focus on more strategic tasks. Keep Zoe and Allie in mind as we explore how technology and strategy come together in the HR landscape. All right, so let's imagine you're Zoe. Zoe's a fresh face at Softura, buzzing with excitement, but also a bit nervous for her new position as a product designer. Enter Allie, our AI Copilot. Allie helps Zoe breeze through the onboarding process, ensuring she's set to hit the ground running. Zoe can ask Allie questions anytime, taking a load off of our HR team. It's not just about tasks. It's about making Zoe feel welcomed and prepared from day one. Frank.
All right. Yeah, and it's able to adjust its tone, and you'll see some evidence of that here. So since you're familiar with that model that I just showed you, what I'm going to be showing you has a specific domain model that we created for Softura using all of our internal information. So these are the websites of our partners and our internal HR policies and benefits. And here are some of the files that I specifically fed to the system so that it's able to answer these questions and find out information without having to go through and say, I don't know what you're asking for. That's all part of the model. So we have the generic information available that's out on the web, and this is happening through Azure and OpenAI. And you can imagine having kind of a toggle here to say, some people in certain organizations, they don't want to have the general information that's out there for fear it could be wrong. It could be wrong. And so they only want to use, companies' policies information. In that case, it'll still use the OpenAI to interpret what a user is asking for, but its answers will only come from the data that you have provided from your enterprise. And then on the, and that's all safe and secure. On the right side here, you'll see we use Microsoft Teams and SharePoint. We have Ali, our HR Copilot. She actually is a channel that lives inside of Teams, which is also accessible via the web, Slack, Instagram, Facebook, a bunch of other places. And then here are our partners that we work with. And we have application programming interfaces and web services and adapters that allow us to talk to these. So when I ask for things like, how much leave do I have, it can tell me what our leave policy is and tell me specifically how much leave I've accrued if I've got that turned on and plugged into our system. So here we're going to come into a Viva-based portal, like you might see in Teams. And we're going to welcome Zoe. And you'll notice we start to use some emojis. She is a Gen Zer, and the bot introduces herself. And unlike other bots, this one is actually useful. And I say that because I've built a lot of bots and know how frustrating they can be for users when they don't actually understand what you're asking for, or if you have different words that you're trying to say. If you don't have the right words, it doesn't necessarily understand. So here she's. Ali is introducing herself to Zoe and saying, I can actually help you do things. So not only can I tell you about things, I can actually do them for you. This is my ADD brain looks at this and gets overwhelmed. It's like way too much information for me, but it assures me that she's going to actually track all that for me over the coming weeks. And so, I can choose one of these. I can ask something else if I want it. But since I'm Zoe's new, she wants to go and check out benefits enrollment.
So what's all those emojis, right?
So that's probably more to prove a point than anything, but it's the ability to communicate with people at their level. You can go and say, talk to this person at a 4th grade English as a second language level, or you can say, talk to me like you're Shri, and it'll come up with very specific, very technical, detailed information about
including the UX, right? The user experience and the user interface. That
Yes.
would change also, right?
Yes. Yeah, so it can be more verbose. It can even be accessible if you have a screen reader or Braille. Different types of technologies can all be assisted through this kind of interface. And so now I'm going to look at getting a brief overview of our health, dental, and other wellness benefits. And so I can go through this, and I won't bore you with all the details of all the different pieces that she has to go through to get signed up. But if you can think of, in your organizations, how many different places do you have to go to sign up for things? How many different user IDs and passwords do you have? Do you have to go to other websites, or are they integrated with your own with single sign-on? There's lots of these different things that happen, and a lot of organizations, have this cornucopia of different services that are very hard to get complete information from. And so later on in the week, she's gone through and she's done, her orientation and her onboarding. She's got her IDs and things set up. So these are the things that she's gotten completed. She hasn't gone through and done some of these other things. And we're going to go and get ready for the next event. And so on Friday, she logs in and she, says, "Hey, Zoe, mentions to Ali, you've done a really good job. You've gotten over 75% of these things completed." And I was going to show her some love. HR systems don't have to be.
There's some research that suggests, right, that the onboarding experience of a company, of an employee at a company, dictates how long. There's a big positive correlation between that and their tenure in the company. Right? If you have a fantastic onboarding experience, the longer you stay. So I think there's a great context here.
Absolutely. I remember when I first joined IBM years and years and years ago, I actually got sent a box of goodies. And in there was my training videos and all these things. I'm telling my age, but and I had swag, and so I felt like I was an IBMer, and we have swag with our groups when people join Softura. You can see them online on LinkedIn and Facebook and other places. So it's part of that love and part of that culture that you're trying to establish. The other thing I want to kind of draw your attention to is these little check marks and the notion of gamification and making things fun. And so kind of see our little journey, how far we've gone, and get a visual feel for that. Did you have something else, Sri? Or was that Jim?
No.
Okay.
All good.
No, all good there.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. So back over to Jim.
Back to Jim. So a few years down the line.
Before we talk about before we talk about the next use case there, Jim, I think one thing that's worth mentioning is the fact that a lot of these things that Frank was just talking about, the mundane tasks, are related to now Ali, right? So the HR folks can really focus on the employees, right? Who are the core assets of what they do. So they can really focus on the high level personalized touch and experience to the employees, while the mundane tasks are done through Ali, right?
Exactly. One of the HR specialists that I worked with, I asked her, what were kind of the biggest pains that she was feeling in terms of dealing with employees, and she said, I answer the same questions over and over and over, and all the information's out there. It's just not easy enough to find. And that's the frustrating thing. It's frustrating for both sides, both the service provider and the service receiver. It's frustrating if you can't find it, and it's frustrating if you can't help. So the ability to ask these everyday questions and give you the policy answers, et cetera, is very helpful. And we'll see more about that in this next one.
Okay. So a few years down the line, Zoe has some big news. She's going to be adopting a child, and she's going to be a mom from her own. Ali is right there with her, offering confidential advice on Softura's maternity benefits, tracking those benefits for Zoe, and connecting with top local healthcare providers, and even sending weekly pregnancy tips. Zoe knows she can rely on Ali for quick, accurate information, which also frees up time for our HR department. Ali ensures Zoe stays plugged into Softura's culture, even as she prepares for this new life chapter of her adopted child and her own pregnancy.
Yep, it's when it rains, it pours, right? So one of the things she's curious about is, can she use her FSA or HAS? I noticed it misspells it there. She meant to say HSA, but it gets recorrected by the system. But can she use that money to help pay for expenses related to adoption? And so this is where Allies has gone out and searched and looked at the IRS, and it says yes. According to IRS publication 969, you may be able to use up to $15,000, $950 from your flexible spending account or HSA to pay for adoption expenses. And then it's got the caveats. And one of the things that we did in setting up the persona of Ali is to be, when she's unsure of things, to not over commit or overpromise things that she doesn't actually know about. In this case, she does know a lot about the IRS, and it says here you should probably check with HSA Bank or FSA Flex administrators to determine what expenses are eligible from the plan. And it says she also may want to consult with an adoption professional or financial advisor, et cetera. But so she's curious about this. And so this is where we've gone in, and you saw in the previous diagram when I talked about the custom adapters and the software interfaces. This is actually real information from Zoe being pulled into what's known as an adaptive card. And this kind of hyper card has information that's completely relevant to her. It's private to her. No one else could see this other than her HR partners, if they're allowed. And it's got a link to go out to the actual HSA Bank if she wants to click in and find out more. It's got a link to her learning center, so she can go and find out what kinds of things they have, because down here it's got links to their HSA and FSA and HRA facts and this thing called stack card facts. I don't even know what stack cards are. I think I know what it means, but I could click on that to learn about that. And then it's given her the contribution limits. So this is how much she has available today, as of the 28th. And so she's got more in her FSA than her HSA. But if she's looking at becoming a new parent, she could, potentially come in and use the family amount. So she could actually increase those, and if you wanted, you could make it so that she could actually increase those right from here. So you can imagine upping your 401k contributions or other things right inside of Teams without having to leave it. And then she has a little hint that says, hey, you may want to save more money for your growing family. Here's the contact information. They're open 24/7. I can send it to my email or my phone, if in case I want to share it with my spouse or significant other. And then also here is Sarah. Sarah is available via Teams. So if I'd like to video call her or talk with her online, I can absolutely do that. And her contact information is here. But at this time, just want to click on the IRS information. Here's to show you, this is actually the real information, so she can go and make her own informed decision.
All right, so let's go to the next chapter in her life. Life's full of twists and turns, and Zoe finds herself with additional responsibilities from a health concern about her father. He has fallen sick, and Zoe is having concerns balancing her home and work life. Zoe decides that she needs to leave Softura to care for her father. It is a bittersweet goodbye, but Allie is there to make the transition smooth for Zoe. Zoe knows she can turn to Allie for any last-minute questions, easing the burden on HR, from finalizing her 401k options to ensuring she's aware of her post-employment benefits. Allie makes sure Zoe leaves with no loose ends. Back to you.
Yeah. And we also want to emphasize that she wants to actually make it as pleasant and as graceful an exit as possible, because an increasing trend in the employment world is this notion of boomerang employees, where you've got people that have been with the company, left, gone to go do other things, whether it's to go follow their dream, do a startup, have kids, whatever. Those companies that people left with a good taste in their mouth or good sense of camaraderie with that group are much more likely to come back, and it's a win-win. They already know the company, and the company knows them. They may need some additional training and some new information, but they're very just like it's much more expensive to have to go acquire new customers. It's much cheaper to sell and grow your existing revenue from your existing customers. The same thing is true with the employees. It's much better to maintain and keep and attract great quality employees than to have to go out and get new ones from scratch. We all know how difficult that can be in this particular market. So she says, this is where this is different than most normal bots. Now she has some empathy for what's going on. So Zoe says, yeah, she number one, she remembers that I've adopted a new child, and she says I'm overwhelmed. And so she comes back, will tell me more what's going on. She says, yeah, just as we were getting used to the new routine, father fell and broke his hip, and my mother can no longer care for him. His pension isn't enough to cover all the medical bills, and they're struggling. So you might say that's an awful lot of information. Well, the more information you give, the better the results and the answers that you'll get with the chatbot. And so here you can see, this is literally coming straight from the machine. This is not being edited by anyone. I'm truly sorry to hear about your father's injury and the challenge you're facing. And she says, yeah, doing this, balancing work and parenting and caring for aging parents is overwhelming. Would you like me to connect you to someone to talk in person, or is chatting okay? Mary's online right now if you're interested in talking to her. So not really right now. And she says, I don't know what to do. Alice says, I understand. And so she's got some advice. And so this is advice that is not, it's not in any company policy. This is actually what it did based on its general knowledge of the world and HR laws in the various states, the United States, et cetera, as well as consideration for the other things that she might be having to think about. And so each one of these has more detail behind it, showing, what else would you want to do when talking to your parents about their finances and medical, requirements. She has resources and links to places she can go get, look for aid. She can look at, how she's going to, reconfigure her home, meet with lawyers, find support, coordinate care with elder care. If you're one of the organizations that has elder care, that might be a benefit that you can directly support, as well as talking with your family and HR. And also reminds her to, prioritize self-care. You can't very well take care of others if you yourself are a wreck. And it also talks about, gives her things to think about from a long-term planning perspective. So again, she can send that to her phone or her email, and she reinforces that, hey, we're here for you. You're not alone. People are going through all sorts of things, and if you'd like more information, you can click on any one of those. But we're always here if you need us.
Hey, Frank, we got a question that came through that I wanted to share with you.
Sure.
And I'm going to paraphrase, but the question is around this is really super confidential information that Zoe is sharing. Can you speak to the confidential nature of this and where this data goes, and then also to all of the information about her Vanguard account, about all the other domain-specific items that are transacted between Zoe and Allie, and how do we know that this stuff doesn't leave the Softerra domain in this example?
Sure. So this is very much like dealing with a patient system or financial services world. The information is encrypted and it's held locally in the tenant that this particular client has. We have a local instance of this. Even though we may be using services on the web, for example, Vanguard and Paycom and Benefits Hub, et cetera, they all have their own APIs where we have secure, business to business credentials and very, very long 16-bit keys, which is a simple way of saying a really big number that's really hard to crack. That basically says, this is Softerra and we're talking to this organization and we have the right to do so. And now, once I'm coming in, I'm also because Zoe is logged in. I know that this is Zoe that's asking for this information, so it's not anybody else but Zoe. And so now that I know that it's Zoe, and she's logged in with her secure credentials in Windows, then I can know that I can give her this information. So to the extent that she doesn't share her password and she doesn't have an exact duplicate twin, this is very, very difficult information to get any other way. This is very locked down, and this is being used in because of my experience, I can tell you the same encryption and the capabilities that are being used to hide and make these things secret are the same things that our CIA and NSA are using to make sure that all their communications are secret. So it's very hardened and industrial proof. Does that I think I answered the question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so she's okay. Unfortunately, she does need to resign. And so they're sorry to hear that, but basically here's a short and sweet version of the exit process. The HR manager will actually have a longer process that has all the details and the specific fields and dates and times, et cetera. But this is, again, trying to make it, a very light load for her. Because this is Teams, she can get this on her phone as well as she can email it to herself as well. And also we want to really try to see if there's a way to salvage this and create a fan. And so that when she does leave, that she leaves on good terms, and she becomes a brand ambassador for us. She tells others about what a great place it was to work and how wonderful it was she was treated when she was leaving, and she's given her farewell goodies, whatever those may be. And basically, this takes her through the whole step-by-step process, including all of these things. And each one of them behind the scenes has more details and a workflow for each. So we've worked with customers to actually automate this entire thing. In fact, there's a whole genre of RPA, or robotic process automation workflows, around the joiners, movers, and leavers. And so those are, because people leave organizations for lots of reasons, and it isn't necessarily termination. They might be going on leave, they might be going military, right, et cetera. So there's lots of intricacies and details that this bot knows about.
So those were great demos there, Frank. So before we answer this, why this is insightful, I have a question from Tom in the chat there. I'm reading it. Yes, there needs to be a balance between building relationships. We talked about how to automate the mundane, right? Tom had a good point there. Sometimes these mundane tasks really help to build relationships and commitment. So you're absolutely right there, Tom. You got to balance, the mundane with the special personalized experience, but your point is well taken.
So, yeah, and I actually have a thought about that, just real quick to follow up on that. I was working with a bank that their mean customer age was 73, and they couldn't understand why people would want to have mobile banking and be able to use things on their iPhone or tablets, and because they said none of our customers are asking for it. And I was like, well, yeah, but for the next generations, the millennials and certainly the Gen Zers and the next group beyond, if you don't exist here, you don't exist.
You don't exist.
and they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. So while I completely agree, the human relationships is really what makes everything happen. It's why so many companies say that, bromide or cliche, it's our people that make the difference. It really is. It is the people that make the difference. And it's why I'm at Softura. I love the people that I work with. Not everybody can say those kinds of things, but when you have a good group working together, you have good synergies in that culture. Those are the things that are important. So if I don't have to ever worry about expenses again, or keeping track of things that I don't like to keep track of, and Allie can do that for me, I'm totally okay giving that to Allie and letting Allie update me weekly. Here's what I did, Frank. I did these expenses for you, and I responded to these emails. And oh, by the way, here's the one from your boss. You need to really think about responding. Maybe you should just call him.
So thinking about from a value perspective, there, Frank. So why is this impactful, right? Obviously, this is all cool stuff, really appealing. But then unless there is a business value to all of this, organizations are not going to adopt it. Right? So this needs to be sold back to the decision makers to say, this is why having technologies like Allie inside of an HR organization makes sense for a company. So why does it make sense? So as part of this, we created a value model here, right? So a lot of the things are related to employee engagement, because obviously this is HR. So they a more comfortable, happy, content employee, increases productivity, morale, all of the good stuff. Then there is the aspect of organizational productivity, right? A much more engaged employee is much more productive, improving the bottom line of the company. Having a solid employee experience reduces employee churn. Talent retention is a big issue in some industries, right? 12%, a typical average for talent retention is about 12%, right? 12% of turnover every year. Now you want to reduce that because cost of hiring is not exactly cheap. And then obviously there's a safety and operating conditions part of it. So when you look at it from a greater shareholder value perspective, if you look at the ESG, environmental, social, and governance part of it. So an engaged employee has now much more interest in making sure that the company itself is doing very well. Take an example of Microsoft. Microsoft is consistently ranked in the top 1 or 2 in their ESG score, and that is reflected in the stock price. Now, why is that so? Because it is the engaged employees help it to move that ESG score all the way up, right? So these are some key areas, that are from a benefits perspective. Now, obviously, nothing is cheap in this world, nothing is free in this world. There are some costs associated with this, right? There's some investment that needs to be anticipated. One of the mistakes that most people make is, oh, let me invest in the technology, and then voila, everything else will fall in place. No, you need to invest in the human capital management of it. The adoption and change management of these technologies inside of a company needs to be eased in. They need to be trained. the talent needs to be pulled in. So there is a significant investment, or not a significant investment. There is an investment that needs to be thought about there too. Processes may need to change because now we're looking at new governance models, new processes, development of new processes. So those processes may need to be changed too. And by the way, I'm not just talking about HR, I'm talking about the organization as a whole, because we have to talk about the entire organization, not just HR. When you think about the value of technologies such as ChatGPT and other Gen AI stuff. So, as Frank, you were talking about, with Zoe's case, Ali had information to her, HIPAA information, PII information, right? So all of that is sensitive information. So that sensitive information needs to be protected very well. So there's a regulatory compliance aspect of it that needs to be taken care of that too, right? There's a broader organization culture development that needs to be done. So there's a question here from Kevin. He talks about what are some case studies of success stories where HR has played a key role. I think there are some great case studies. I think Microsoft is one of them where they were able to garner the entire positive employee experience that ultimately relates in good shareholder wealth, right? Shareholder value. So that is one area. So I know GM has started out on their digital transformation journey, and they've used HR as a positive aspect in developing their experiences too. But there are some challenges too, right? There are some challenges that has come about too. For example, Nokia. When Nokia worked on it this way, so they had some challenges in terms of cultural adjustment, cultural adaptation, and part of the reason is because they didn't pay enough attention to this. These are not meant to scare people here. These are meant to say, look, you got to think about these things, and these are easily addressable if there's a structure around it. For example, cultural adaptation, skills and gaps, reassignments of jobs, employee engagement, talent acquisition. These are some of the areas where we might want to think about as we proceed along this in this path.
Absolutely.
Now,
I've been, as you were talking, I just went ahead and used my Bing Copilot to ask that very question. And it came up with a series of companies: Cadbury, Nissan, Microsoft, Google, HP, etc. And I'll include that in the notes for this when we send out this presentation.
Great call out there. Great call out there, Frank. So one of the things that we did was we created a comprehensive business value model on why technologies such as ChatGPT, Gen AI, and Microsoft Copilot, all of them make sense in a company, right? So we took an illustrative sample company, we call it Valuso, a manufacturer company, and we looked at the key benefits. The key benefits are what you saw earlier, safety, customer experience, increased employee engagement, reduced cost, and the costs are all there in there as well. Now, I'm not going to go over all of this in great detail, but if you're interested, scan the code on the right side, and you'll see an article which gives you full details on how this business case was created, right? But I do want to leave you on one thing on this slide, though. Look at the IRR, the internal rate of return. That's about 300%. So 300% is 3x times the 3x times your investment. That is a significant amount for investing in technologies like ChatGPT. So that's what I would leave you there. That there is a significant amount of
in 1.5
promise
years too,
and potential,
right? In 1.6 years.
And
so it's very fast.
And the payback period is pretty fast too.
Yeah.
So what we did was we took this model, we ran it to the ringer. We looked at a large manufacturing company, medium and small. We looked at an energy vertical. We looked at retail. And if you can look at the numbers on the screen there, the numbers are quite staggering, right? For a large manufacturing company, it's a 4 to 6x return. And for a large retail company, it's a 2 to 2.5 times return. But the key aspect to remember here is the payback time is relatively quick. And why is that? The payback is relatively quick because the adoption of these things, as Frank was mentioning way up earlier in the discussion, most employees are really embracing this change. They want to get to it, right? Which is why we feel that the adoption and change would be much faster, and therefore the benefits would be realized much faster. Anything to add there, Frank?
Yeah, these numbers remind me of my days back at IBM when you were a small company if you were less than $10 billion. But no, I say that in jest, but you can take this as kind of a good indicator. So you don't have to be a multi-billion-dollar organization. You can be a multi-million-dollar organization and have the same kinds of benefits and payback. I remember reading this morning a McKinsey article talking about the productivity that HR gave to the average Fortune 500 company, and they estimate between 220 million to 380 million of productivity is lost every year due to just inefficiencies in the organizations as a whole. When we did the last webinar on finance, we saw that up to 40% of people's financial responsibilities were all things that could be automated. And so just think about that and what that could mean for you.
That is true. But there are some gotchas in here, right? There's clearly some again, these gotchas are not meant to scare you here, but the underlying premise for these kind of models is data. So if your enterprise data model is your data house is not in order, then you might get some biased content. So having that underlying data clean or reasonably quality, of good quality, both from a structured and unstructured perspective, is one aspect of it. Then there is a security risk. If you looked at Ali's interactions with Zoe, there was the issue of PII and HIPAA information. So those things need to be bolted down. I know at Softjira it's being done there, but that needs to be bolted down as well. So security cannot be an afterthought in these kinds of discussions. It needs to go along right from day one. The architecture, the security architecture needs to be built into the regular architecture right from day one. The third part is about the lack of control that can potentially occur. For that, there's a fix. The fix is you have to have a solid governance in place. It doesn't have to be overly restrictive. It doesn't have to be overly bureaucratic, but having that element of control is certainly key. The last aspect there is about exposing technical debt, right? You have to be organizationally ready. So as a process of that, sometimes you expose your technical debt, and leaders of certain organizations may feel a little bit embarrassed. But again, Frank, as you would say, there's nothing to be embarrassed about, right? If you're not ready, just get ready,
Yeah. Everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah. So I want to be cognizant of the time here, Jim and Frank. So today what we did was we reviewed the context of GenAI applications. We talked about the relevance of organizational productivity. Frank and Jim, you talked through some excellent use cases there, right? But then we talked about the business value of all of this. Otherwise, it's not of much use. So where do we go from here, Jim?
So where we go from here, we'll have some questions here, and I'll want to stop at the top of the hour. We can go overtime, but we'll have up on the screen here shortly a QR code. And what I'd like to do is encourage you to book your consultation with the Holistics Group and Softura. Get out your phones if you would, and shoot that. You'll get directly onto a calendar, and we'll coordinate getting Sri and Frank in front of you to help work on your unique use case. I'll get into some questions right now, but one of the things we'll develop when we sit down in our private consultation with you is, what does this cost? Because we've talked about a lot of things, but we haven't talked about cost. But what I'd like to do is ask a few questions that were prepared in advance that came in from clients before, from attendees before, and that we generated internally. I'll start with one for Frank, then go to Sri, and the top of the hour will come off. So Frank, you get the first one. What are some common HR pain points that Microsoft Copilot can alleviate?
I think the answering of repetitive questions is number one. So actually having a very knowledgeable search and conversational chat capability that lets you be an authority on all of your published policies, including your partners' policies. How many people can go back and quickly regurgitate and tell you exactly what page and what paragraph a particular idea or a concept or rule was found. Allie can do that instantly. She's infinitely patient. If you don't understand something, you can ask her to reword it. You can ask her to make it simpler, or you can ask her to go more technical and go longer. And really, I think of it as, many organizations have gone and they've electronified a lot of their systems and processes. But being electronic doesn't mean they've necessarily digitally transformed and actually used the technology to actually gain more business value. So all that paperwork, think about all the forms and paper things and sticky notes that you have to use from system to system to copy information from one place to the next. These are opportunities where a Copilot like Allie can really help streamline your operations.
Okay, Sri, I've got a question for you, and you may have already answered part of this. So if you're short on this, I'll get to a second question for you. But let's try this. What are the potential challenges and risks HR might face during a digital transformation, and how can they be mitigated?
So I think it's a good question again, Jim. It's worth repeating the answer here. As I mentioned earlier, this is a great technology, right? Everybody knows and understands that it's technology oriented, and that's where there's a potential for a mistake, right? It's just a technology, but there's a human component of adoption and change and culture aspect that needs to be taken care of. So that would be a key aspect of introducing these technologies, not just in HR, but anywhere else, is to make sure that you're culturally ready for doing this, right? To make sure that you're ready to give up the mundane as much as possible. But to Tom's point earlier, yes, there's a balance between keeping the mundane and doing the other stuff as well. But moving to real value-added stuff would be a key aspect of our challenge there.
Excellent. Hey, Frank, would you go back one slide to where the QR code is? So, yeah, that one. Sorry, next steps. Again, I want to encourage you to get out your phones and shoot that QR code. You will be receiving a follow-up email with a link to this webinar, so you can share it with your colleagues, share it with your business partners also who are development firms like us. But we really want you to get the word out internally within your organization, and also we'd love to talk to you. Okay, Frank, we got a question for you. What are the key elements? Sorry, that was a Sri question. I'm not going to let that one out. What role, Frank, what role does data quality play in the effectiveness of Microsoft Copilot within HR systems?
So the old adage is garbage in, garbage out. Data quality is a crucial role. Basically, if you don't have the right information, and I'll refer back to the slide that had the person putting their finger on the scale, that potential for bias, incorrect information or wrong information can really be bad, and for lots of reasons, and that's part of that lack of control and the readiness. But understanding where your data is, what the meaning of the data is. Sometimes we find organizations, especially ones that have grown through acquisition, the acquiring part's fairly straightforward, but the merging part is kind of different. And I've worked with numerous customers that literally have different words for exactly the same thing, and then have different meanings for what those words mean. And literally it could be sometimes the opposite. And
okay.
Yeah.
So it's 4 o'clock, and what I'd like to do, let's call a bit of an audible here. I'm going to do a closing on this with some closing remarks, and then we're going to continue for a few moments with questions for those who would like to stay after. So in line with our commitment to respect your time, we have kept within our 60-minute time frame, but the conversation does not stop here. Every attendee and registrant will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this webinar. You can revisit the insights shared today at your convenience and even share it with your colleagues who couldn't join us live. We understand that this topic can raise specific questions for your organization, which is why Frank and Sri have offered to hold a 45-minute consultation. In our follow-up email, you will find a link to arrange for this consultation, or click on that URL QR code on your screen now. It really is a wonderful opportunity to address your unique challenges and needs in a one-on-one setting, and also an opportunity to get to know Softura and the Holistics Group better and learn about our early access to these technologies. Okay, that's a good closing, and thank you all for joining us. Sri, I do have a question for you for those who'd like to stay afterwards. And your question is, what are the key elements of a business justification case, particularly in HR, for integrating Microsoft Copilot into an organization's digital transformation? I think what they're asking, Sri, is how do I sell this to my boss?
So great question there, Jim. I don't know who sent that, but if you go back to what I said earlier, right? The employee engagement part, the organizational productivity, the ESG parts of it, all of that are really the comprehensive model. If you can go back to that particular slide there, Frank, the one before this, yeah. Just scan this. Go to the next slide. Scan this. Scan the QR code there. That will give you all of the information that you need to get the business case information there. This is a very comprehensive business case, a business value model, and you can fit in and adapt your own numbers into that. And some of them may not be quite relevant to you, but some of them others may be. So, but the model itself is comprehensive enough to be useful for all scenarios in HR.
Excellent. Okay, Sri, Frank, and our attendees, thank you very much. So on behalf of the Holistics Group and Softura, we'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for attending this webinar. Your engagement and participation are what make these events worthwhile. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sri.
See you there.
Till later.